We have evidence for the fact that the Earth has been changing based on fossil evidence as well, and I just wanted to show you this quickly before we get into the other different types of evidence for evolution. So the last thing that fossils can show us is how the Earth itself has changed over time. And if you look at this diagram, what it's showing is the continents as we know them now in a different formation. You probably learned this in your earth science class at some point, that all of the land that we currently see on our globe, when you look at a map of the Earth, used to be in different places. And it's fossil evidence more than anything that led us to start to understand this. So let's take a look at what this diagram is showing. So we've got over here this fossil Cynagthus is a land reptile that we find on the continent of South America and into Africa. Another fossil, this Mesosaurus, we find in both continents as well. A fossil of a fern, Lysopteris, is found on all of these continents. And a fossil of this Lystrosaurus, a land reptile again, is found on 3 of the continents. So the fact that we find the same fossils in the same time periods on continents that are now separated leads scientists to hypothesize that these continents must have been connected at some point. So not only are we seeing changes in the things that lived on the planet, but also changes in how the planet itself looked. Okay, now on to other evidence for evolution and common descent. The second piece of evidence that shows that we have relatedness with other organisms is something called embryology. So embryos are developing organisms before they're considered a full-grown newborn. So before they're able to be hatched or to be birthed, they're still developing into their structure, whatever it is they're going to be. So the embryos themselves obviously all take a different path. So the embryo that creates a human, takes a different path in creating a human than the embryo that creates a salamander. However, there are some similarities between human embryos and salamander embryos. For example, a lot of embryos, as they develop, whether they're mammal or reptile or fish, have gills. We're going to discuss this more in class, and you'll see some examples of this, but that's one of the structures that related organisms share. So let me just write this down as an example. Okay, so related organisms, so organisms that have some DNA in common, have some parts of their embryos that are similar. So obviously humans don't have gills when they're born. They go away at some point as the embryo is developing, but they do have them just like other organisms do. Tails is another one that a lot of embryos have, regardless if it's a fish or a reptile or a salamander, or a bird or a mammal. So these structures that embryos have in common, again, gives scientists a clue that these organisms that they belong to are related in some way. And by related, we mean they share some DNA. Okay, because DNA is the instructions for building an embryo, which is eventually the instructions for building an organism. Third piece of evidence for evolution and common descent is something called a homologous structure. Now, homologous structures are found in different species, but they've come from the same body parts. And notice I highlighted that for you. Okay, I want to make sure that you know this distinction because there's other ones coming up that'll be similar to this. So they develop from the same body parts, but have different functions. Those are the key parts of that definition. Now, this might not make much sense until I give you an example. So after you write this definition down, let's go to the examples. So, a human hand, a bat wing, a dog foot, and a whale fin obviously have, again, different functions, right? They do different things. We use our hand for grasping. A bat uses its wing for flying. Our dog uses its foot for walking, and a whale uses its fin for swimming. So those are the different functions. But, as you'll see in a moment, they come from similar body parts. Again, showing that we share some connectedness, some relatedness to these different organisms. So let's look at those structures. In this mix, we do have a human hand, a bat wing, a dog foot, actually I think it's a cat foot, but it's very similar, and a whale fin. So let's think about what is similar about these structures and what is different. Some of the similarities you can see is that we've got in each organism 2 bones in what we might call our forearm. Okay, those 2 bones are kind of a light pink and a light gray. We have 1 upper arm bone in each case. And down on the bottom we have a series of smaller bones that in humans form the fingers. Okay, so those are a lot of different similarities between these different species. Again, showing relatedness. Some of the DNA must be the same. What is different? Well, a lot of the differences come in the size and shape. Let's compare the forearms for just a minute. So this forearm set here, which is a human, I hope you can see that pretty clearly, is different in size and shape than this forearm set. Right? This one here that I just circled, okay, that is very squat and short, whereas the human forearm is longer and thinner. Same thing we can see with the finger bones in the human. So our finger bones compared to others, different in size and shape. Some cases even different in number. The key is that they arose from the same places though. Okay, they developed from the same body parts. So let's take a look at who belongs to what. One of these is from a frog. One is from a lizard, one is from a whale, one is from a bird, one is from a human, one is from a bat, and one is from a cat. Let's start to match them up. So, the one that is from the human, we already know, is over here. Okay. The next easiest one, hopefully you can see is very different, is the bat wing. That's right here. You may not have realized that, but a bat wing is constructed of long finger bones, essentially, with a membrane over the top. The bird, if you've ever had a chicken wing and looked closely at the bones inside, this is what they look like here. The whale fin is this one in the middle. Again, you may not realize that, but inside that flipper are long finger bones. The frog has longer, thinner toes with webbing between them. So this is our frog here. The cat has a long forearm bone but shorter fingers. That's this one here. And the lizard has some pretty long toes as well. So again, just to point out that we see in these organisms so a lot of similarities in their structures, even though the actual limbs are used for different things, be it swimming or flying or walking or whatever, they still have some similarities, pointing to this relatedness, this DNA that we hold in common.